They say her voice could freeze blood in a man's veins, that when she spoke, even the crows stopped mid-flight. In the winter of 1822, a 9-year-old girl in rural Tennessee whispered a prophecy no one dared believe, until her entire family was found dead in their beds, and she was gone, without a trace. You were never meant to hear this story. Buried in county records, too fragmented to stitch together, hidden behind centuries of folklore. But if you listen closely, you'll feel it, the hum of something older than the town it happened in, something that doesn't forget, something that watches. Her name was Evangeline Hart, born under the black frost moon of 1813, when the sky turned purple and a comet flared like a bleeding eye. Locals called her cursed, said she spoke with animals, walked barefoot through fire, and never blinked. They were wrong. She wasn't cursed. She was awakened. At age 7, she told the town preacher that his unborn son would drown in a well before his 6th birthday. He laughed in her face. 5 years later, the boy's body was pulled from the bottom of a stone shaft. His fingers were torn raw from clawing at the sides. By 9, she barely spoke. She only wrote symbols, spirals, triangles inside circles, and something else. Not English, not Latin, something primal, untranslatable. Until one night in early December, she wrote a single sentence on the wall of her bedroom in charcoal. They will not see another dawn. The next morning, her mother, father, and 3 siblings were all dead. No signs of struggle, no wounds, no poison, eyes wide open, as if they'd seen something just before the light left. And Evangeline, gone, the window open, the snow outside, untouched. No prints, no trail, no sound, just silence. The sheriff sealed the room, then vanished 6 days later, and for 2 centuries her name became myth, a whisper in Tennessee, hey, Ollows, a ghost in the old records. But those who still speak of her, speak carefully, because Evangeline Hart was never found, and some say she didn't vanish, she was taken. By what no one dares to name. But in the symbols she left behind, a pattern was buried, one tied to secret societies, ancient rites, and a map of power stretching far beyond that cabin in the woods. You're not just hearing a story, you're stepping into a conspiracy older than this country. And now that you've heard the first name, they'll want to know who else knows. You said, the cabin still stands, rotting into the soil like a wound that refuses to close. Locals won't go near it, not even the bold ones who hunt or trespass for a thrill. GPS maps blur the coordinates. The land deed is missing from state archives. And yet every few years someone stumbles across it. They don't walk out the same. One man in 1983 said he heard a little girl humming from inside as he stepped onto the porch, an old melody that didn't match any tune he knew. When he returned home, he carved spirals into his bedroom walls every night for a month. His wife said he did it while sleepwalking. Then one night, he set fire to their house and smiled as it burned. This isn't just folklore. The deeper you look, the clearer the structure becomes. It's a lattice of trauma, a recursive ritual etched across generations. Evangeline wasn't a random anomaly. She was chosen by a mechanism as old as civilization. A mechanism designed to find certain children, awaken them, and then extract them. You think this was just about one girl? It never is. There are patterns in US history, buried like splinters beneath the skin. Children vanishing in cycles, always in small towns, always after unexplained deaths in their families, always leaving behind strange symbols. 37, Ohio, 1891, Louisiana, 1914, Montana. All girls between 8 and 10. All warned their families of a coming death. All disappeared into thin air. All cases dismissed as mass hysteria, wild animals, or mental illness. But in every case, at least one witness survived, and each gave a different detail, but one thing stayed the same. Before the vanishings, the child would speak a phrase, not in English, not in any known tongue, a phrase that made grown men weep or collapse according to reports. The phonetics vary, but when reconstructed across cases, they align into a sound pattern found in pre-Babylonian inscriptions. And here's the part that should make your blood cold. The sound pattern is also used in altered form in modern advertising jingles, corporate brand audio signatures, Pentagon PSYOP research, mass psychological influence systems. Coincidence or a signal? We're trained not to ask. We're trained to forget. But once you recognize the pattern, it starts showing up everywhere, carved into old churches, hidden in oil company logos, encoded in public education architecture. You think the girl was crazy? No. She was speaking a language designed to control the subconscious. She wasn't predicting death. She was warning us, and they silenced her for it. The symbol she left behind, the spiral within the triangle, wasn't child's play. It was ancient, older than written language, found etched into stone walls in Malta, under catacombs in Paris, and hidden beneath floorboards of colonial churches in Virginia. It doesn't just mean something, it does something, because symbols, when charged with trauma and belief, become more than signs. They become systems, keys, and when a child draws them unconsciously, it's not creativity, it's connection to something that's been waiting. The deeper I dug, the clearer the convergence became. Evangeline Hart was not an isolated case. Her disappearance was part of a recurring psychological harvest, where children on the threshold of adolescence who exhibit uncanny insight or premonition are flagged by forces we don't see, not always taken physically, sometimes just rewired. Because what we call madness in children has another name in the shadows: receptivity. They can see what we've been conditioned to unsee. That's why they're monitored. That's why certain gifted programs in public schools were originally created by intelligence agencies, not educators. You didn't know that, did you? Project Stargate, Project MK Search, Project Often, all real, all declassified. All involved studying children who displayed unexplained abilities, empathy beyond measure, predictive dreams, accelerated pattern recognition, and in the earliest drafts of those reports, the name E. Hart appears in the footnotes. Not once, not twice, 3 times, across 3 different projects, across 3 different decades, each time as an example of proto-activation, whatever that means. They never expected someone to stitch the fragments together. They assume most people won't even try. But you're not most people. You're here, following the trail. And if you're still watching, you need to understand something. The moment you recognize the design, it recognizes you. That's how it works. These systems feed on attention, not because attention is power, but because it is currency. The more you give it, the more you see, and the harder it becomes to unsee. So why was a 9-year-old girl speaking in a dead language and predicting the deaths of her entire family? Because someone, or something, had already spoken to her, trained her, awakened her. And when she broke the cycle, when she warned instead of obeyed, she became a liability. And liabilities don't vanish. They're erased. But not before leaving one last message. They will not see another dawn. The question now is, who is they? And when is our dawn coming? Because I promise you this, you're closer than you think. After the Hart family deaths, the official narrative unraveled like rotten thread. No fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, no known poisons in the blood, and yet every body bore the same expression: wide eyes, mouths half open, as if mid-scream, but their vocal cords were unruptured. Not a sound had been heard. Not one neighbor reported hearing anything that night. Not even the dogs barked. It's as if the entire event happened in a separate layer of reality, one stitched over our own. The coroner's report, one of the few still available, contains a chilling line scrawled in the margins by the town doctor. It's as if their souls were pulled out before their bodies realized. But even that report was later scrubbed. Officially, the fire that claimed the county courthouse in 1833 destroyed all records. How convenient. But here's where it gets darker. The week after the Hart family deaths, 2 men arrived from out of state. No names, no affiliation. One claimed to be a survey inspector, the other simply a man of the cloth. Neither was seen again after 7 days in the region. But according to recovered letters from a local school teacher who kept a private journal, they had taken something from the house. A book, wrapped in black cloth, bound in what was described as leather that looked like no animal known. It was covered in the same symbols Evangeline drew on her walls. The teacher's final entry? A single sentence. They said it doesn't just predict death, it chooses who deserves it. Then nothing. No more letters, no obituary. Her name vanishes from census records. 3 people, all gone, all touched by the same force. That's not coincidence. That's containment. You think this was just a haunted house story? You're not listening. This was a breach. Evangeline's warning wasn't just for her family, it was for anyone watching, anyone who might recognize what was happening. That we are being watched, not by satellites or governments, but by ancient systems designed to replicate themselves through us. Each time someone with the gift awakens, the system tries to fold them back in, with comfort, with lies, with power. But if they resist, they vanish. And that's the part they don't want you to see. Because some of them don't vanish completely. Some of them leave messages buried in time, codes in the walls, words in a child's whisper, pieces of a larger mechanism that, when reassembled, doesn't just explain what happened, it explains what's happening now. And it starts with remembering that these stories are not fiction. They are warnings that survived long enough to find you. You said, the deeper you go, the colder it gets. Not in temperature, but in truth. Because once you pull back the veil on cases like Evangeline Hart's, you begin to see the ice underneath the fire, that chilling, organized indifference, that precision of silence that only powerful systems can maintain, not a mess of conspiracy but a blueprint, symmetrical, intentional, old. And Evangeline's story? It's one corner of a massive design. One of many, engineered over centuries. When I tracked down one of the only surviving descendants of the Hart family, a man living under a different name in rural Arkansas, he was 84 years old. He had changed his identity 3 times. He said he was tired of running from ghosts that don't walk. When I asked him what he meant, he showed me a small tin box wrapped in burlap. Inside, a single page torn from a Bible, completely blackened in ash, a brass key with no teeth, and a child's drawing, a house, a tree, and a figure with no face. In the upper corner, in what looked like dried blood, was the same phrase Evangeline wrote the night before her family died. They will not see another dawn. The man said it's not a threat, it's a truth. Because the people who control the narrative never see anything. Not really. They're blind by design. They've traded sight for influence, traded instinct for instruction. But children like Evangeline, they see. They see what the rest of us buried, and that's what makes them dangerous. Here's what most don't realize. There is a method used in psychological conditioning called nested trauma encoding. It's not just about hurting people, it's about fracturing perception. Done early enough, it can suppress natural gifts like premonition, emotional intelligence, and lateral pattern recognition, not eliminate them, suppress them. And guess where this method shows up first? Childhood education systems. RL, IGES catechisms, television programming for ages 3 to 9, coincidence? Or is it all part of a larger framework to contain the Evangelines before they awaken? You were taught to call it imagination, to call them strange, to medicate the insight out of them. But those systems don't want to protect them. They want to extract something from them. Evangeline saw the whole machine, and she spoke. And they made sure her voice wouldn't echo. But they failed, because you're hearing it now. And if your skin is cold, if something in your chest feels like it just clicked into place, good. You're remembering something they spent your entire life making you forget. There's a term hidden in Masonic texts, barely translated, known as the aurum filii, Latin but loosely meaning the golden daughter, not literal gold. Something rarer, something metaphysical, a soul born with resonance, aligned to the frequencies that govern the architecture of control, a threat if not initiated, a weapon if properly harnessed. Evangeline Hart fits every requirement. The timing of her birth under a rare frost moon, the prophetic utterances, the symbols, and most damning of all, the disappearance without a trace after a ritual-like death scene. That's not folklore. That's initiation by removal. They didn't kill her. They took her to study, to break, to convert, or worse, to use. Because in certain secret circles, children like her are not seen as people. They're seen as vessels, conduits between planes, not just between life and death, but between seen and unseen dimensions of power. And when those conduits act on their own, warn others, resist extraction, they must be neutralized. What does that mean for us? It means the game you think you're playing, good versus evil, truth versus lies, isn't even the real game. That's just the outer theater. The real war is over perception, and perception is governed by language, symbol, trauma, and memory. Evangeline was a glitch in the programming. She was not supposed to remember, but she did. And in doing so, she became a mirror. That's why her story was buried, diluted, mocked as folklore, because if you ever saw her clearly, you might see yourself more clearly too. You might start to remember the dreams you had as a child before they convinced you they were nonsense. You might start to recall the symbols you drew in the margins of notebooks before they told you to grow up. You might remember the whispers, because every generation has its Evangelines and every system of power has its erasers. But here's the real secret they've fought for centuries to bury. You don't need to be born special, you only need to remember that you already were. This story isn't about a girl from Tennessee in 1822. It's about a fracture in the veil. And it's about you, standing at the edge of that tear and choosing whether or not to look through it. Because once you do, you'll never see the world the same way again. And they will know you've seen it. And they will watch you. Just like they watched her. Let's talk about the watchers. Not the paranoid metaphor of they as men in suits. Not satellites, not spies. No, something older. Older than government. Older than language. You feel them when you speak forbidden truth aloud and the room goes silent. When you wake up at 3:33 a.m. with the sensation you're not alone. They don't knock. They observe. And they were watching Evangeline long before she wrote that message. What message? They will not see another dawn. That wasn't prophecy. That was defiance. She didn't just predict their deaths, she announced them. A declaration against whatever forces had tried to control her, against the invisible hand steering her family toward annihilation. And it worked. But at a cost. You don't declare war on an invisible empire without consequence. The Watchers come in many forms. Some wear uniforms, some wear robes. But most, they wear masks of normalcy. Teachers, priests, therapists, CEOs. Their job is not to destroy you, but to disorient you, to make you forget the moment you began to see. They use systems, not weapons, institutions, not bullets. And the worst part? Most don't even know they're part of it. Because the greatest trick ever played wasn't hiding the truth. It was making the masses enforce their own blindness. Through ridicule, through shame, through distraction. So when a 9-year-old girl in 1822 began dreaming of deaths before they happened, when she started drawing things that matched Mesopotamian sigils with no possible exposure, when she described rituals that aligned with Babylonian blood rites, she wasn't just being watched, she was being targeted. She became a signal flare in the dark, visible to forces most of us are trained to ignore. And when her family died, she disappeared, and the officials vanished alongside her. A cold silence fell over Tennessee, the silence of something sealed. But sealed things don't stay buried forever. The vibrations are returning because a pattern can only be suppressed so long before it repeats, and this pattern is older than any country, darker than any creed. So why are you hearing this now? Because something in you survived the programming, some spark, some fragment of whatever Evangeline was made of. And now it's waking up. Don't run from it. And don't dismiss what you're feeling right now as entertainment, because the truth doesn't sound like thunder, it sounds like recognition, and once it hits, it doesn't leave, just like she didn't. She's still out there, and what she saw is already happening again. You said, "There's something you need to understand and it's going to sting. History as you know it, it's not memory, it's design." You were handed a script when you were a child. Your schools, your television, your church, even your parents, most of them didn't know they were passing it down. But they did. And buried deep in that script is a single command. Forget. Forget the strange things you saw before language. Forget the way the world felt alive before they named it for you. Forget the faces you saw in the trees, the lights that pulsed behind your eyes before sleep. Forget the knowing, because remembering makes you dangerous. Evangeline remembered, and when she wrote down the spiral inside the triangle, she wasn't inventing anything. She was restoring a symbol older than time, a cipher for seeing through illusion, a visual frequency. That spiral, it matches electromagnetic wave maps. The triangle, a reference to trinities that go far beyond religion: mind, body, will, memory, trauma, transformation, creator, container, consumer. 3 is not just symbolic, it's structural. So when Evangeline placed a spiral within a triangle, she was doing something the Watchers fear. She was activating memory. And memory is the one thing the system cannot fully erase. It can hide it, bury it, but under the right conditions it erupts like fire under ice. That's what this video is. Not information. Activation. You don't need to believe everything I say. You need to feel what wakes up in your chest as I say it. Because if something's stirring in you right now, something ancient, quiet, unnameable, that's not coincidence. That's the memory calling back. The same memory that made a 9-year-old girl in 1822 defy the forces that wanted to use her. The same memory that kept her name alive through whispers and dead ends. And if you're ready to claim that memory, drop this phrase into the comments twice, once to open the gate and once to step through it. I remember the spiral. That phrase isn't for me, it's for you, to lock in the transformation, to burn a signal into the algorithm they can't ignore. This is not a story, it's a summoning, and now the question becomes, what else have you forgotten? You said, start with the mirrors, because that's where they hide it. Not in locked vaults or underground chambers, but in reflections, in the things you pass every day without question: language, architecture, screens, statues, laws, reflections of power designed to show you only what they want you to see. But Evangeline, she saw what was behind the mirror, and they hated her for it. She spoke of the house beneath the house. Not literally, metaphorically, a second layer of reality nested beneath the one we're forced to operate in, where the symbols don't just decorate, they dictate, where the stories we're told are inverted versions of something else. Let me explain. Every time you turn on a screen, you enter a ritual: flickering light, repetitive sound, isolated focus. Your brain drops into theta waves, suggestibility mode, and in those moments you're not being entertained. You're being conditioned. Evangeline was born before screens, but not before control. They used churches back then, pulpits, bells, chants. She saw through that too. She once told her younger brother, "The preacher wears the mask of a man, but behind his words, it's something old." After she vanished, that preacher left the town within 48 hours. His name was never spoken again, and every child in his congregation was given a silver coin and relocated to a new school built with federal money. The records don't say where that money came from. But I found something. A ledger buried in the National Archives, stamped with a red sigil that matches one of Evangeline's wall drawings. The transaction number linked to a Shell trust in Geneva, the same trust that helped fund MKUltra's early trials in the 1950s. What does this mean? It means her disappearance wasn't random. It was funded, and not just to cover it up, but to replicate it, because she wasn't the first. She was the first to speak. And even Rice's system of control fears the speaker, the one who names the thing in the dark, the one who doesn't flinch. This is why your world feels hollow, because the people who shaped it for you, education boards, entertainment giants, religious authorities, they weren't building for truth. They were building a container, a cage made of mirrors, one that reflects your image back so many times you forget there was ever a real you beneath it. But Evangeline left a crack in that glass, and now you've found it. What happens next depends on whether you step through it. You said, step carefully, because once you cross this threshold, there's no going back. Not because something will stop you, but because something inside you will finally start. The crack Evangeline left, it's not just metaphor, it's energetic. A rent in the fabric of the false world, and every time someone looks through it, sees past the lie, past the comfort, past the pretty distractions, the system shakes. Not much, but enough to notice. That's why most people around you feel like they're asleep with their eyes open, why they flinch from deep questions, why they change the subject when you speak about dreams that feel too real, because somewhere in their subconscious, they can feel the thing stirring underneath, and they're terrified of what it might reveal. Evangeline wasn't. That's what made her lethal. One of the last things she ever wrote, discovered decades later behind a rotting panel in the attic, was a list of names. Not townspeople, not family, names that shouldn't exist in her time. Adara, Blythe, Cora, Isolde, Nix. Researchers dismissed them as fantasy, but I traced them. Each name matches a file in post-Wally Woo psychic research projects, specifically in female-only test subjects. Girls who claimed precognitive dreams, telepathic impressions, unexplained languages. Each girl disappeared before age 12, each from a different country, each with one matching detail in their final school records. A hand-drawn triangle with a spiral inside it, same as Evangeline's. We are not dealing with isolated hauntings. This is not about ghosts. It's about harvest. Children born with a fracture in the illusion, girls especially, they are receptive conduits. The system knows this. That's why it rewrites history to make them seem hysterical, fragile, mad. It breaks them early, with fear, with shame, with silence. But once in a generation, one speaks. And when she doesn't just break the silence, she exposes the architecture, the lattice of lies, the myth of freedom, the artificial ceilings placed on your soul. That's what Evangeline did. And when she vanished, she didn't disappear into the woods. She was pulled into a deeper layer, one reserved for anomalies, one we're not supposed to speak of. But here's the problem for them. Her message survived. Her symbol survived. And now you've seen it. The mirror is broken, and something old is watching you now, waiting to see if you'll pretend this didn't change you. But I know better, because you wouldn't still be here if you weren't already cracking the surface. By now, you feel it. That pressure in your chest isn't anxiety. It's awareness trying to pierce the shell they built around your mind. The story of Evangeline Hart is no longer about her. It's about you. About what you were always capable of seeing, before they trained your eyes to close. Let me show you something they didn't expect anyone to connect. The year Evangeline vanished, 1822, was also the year that several plantations across the American South began reporting the same strange events. Livestock found dead without injury, slave quarters ransacked yet untouched by fire, children waking up screaming the same name in their sleep. Vial. That name doesn't exist in any common language, but in Gnostic texts, Vail was a watcher spirit, neither angel nor demon, tasked with observing the flow of hidden knowledge between worlds. Not influencing, just watching. Until, as the text reads, the daughter tore the veil, and veil wept blood. It was seen as prophecy. And it happened in the same region, the same month, the same year Evangeline left her message. Coincidence? Or did she become the daughter who tore that veil? Because here's what they fear most. When someone remembers what the veil is, they start asking what's behind it. And when they go far enough, they don't come back empty. They return with keys, and those keys are not symbolic. They are real. Sound frequencies, ancient geometry, emotional alchemy. They don't just describe reality, they create it. That's why secret societies, intelligence programs, and religious institutions have spent centuries hoarding that knowledge, because once you control creation, you control perception, and once you control perception, you control belief. And belief, my friend, is the software of the human soul. Evangeline cracked it. She remembered how to rewrite the program, and she tried to share it with a mess. Age, a symbol, a name. But they erased the meaning, flooded it with fear, and silenced every attempt to speak it again. Except this one. Right here, right now, because somehow you found the crack. You kept listening. And now something is forming in the shadows of your memory. Don't look away. It's not just your eyes that are opening. It's your original design. And when you remember that, nothing they've built can hold you. You said, there is a silence beneath all sound. A silence older than language. It's not absence, it's containment. That's where they locked the truth. Not in vaults, not behind passwords. But inside a silence so deep, most never even hear it. They mistake it for emptiness. But Evangeline, she heard what lived inside it. And when she wrote that message, they will not see another dawn, she wasn't casting a curse. She was releasing a sound. A rupture, a code. Because there are words that do not just describe reality, they restructure it. In every ancient mystery school, from Kemet to Delphi to the Tibetan Bon, there was a doctrine never written down. It passed only from mouth to ear. It taught that the universe is held together by vibrational agreements, contracts encoded in the collective unconscious. Break the contract. You break the world they built around you. That's what she did. The morning after her family's deaths, the air around the Hart cabin was described by a neighbor as thick, like walking through wet glass. He said when he tried to enter he couldn't move forward, his body shook, and from inside he swore he heard the voice of a child whispering in reverse. That wasn't hallucination, it was residual frequency. What she released in that house wasn't just a message, it was a detonation, a spiritual grenade lobbed into the machine of control, and that's why she was taken, not to punish her, to study her. Because they don't destroy anomalies. They harvest them, feed them into think tanks, research labs, black site programs, find out what they know, then either convert or contain. And in the rare case someone can't be converted, they're buried in folklore, reduced to myths, labeled as witches, ghosts, or unstable children. Sound familiar? Evangeline became a myth, by design. Because if they can turn a truth into a ghost story, they win. They poison the memory, strip it of its power, reframe it as fear instead of freedom. But they made one mistake. They forgot that truth echoes, even in silence. even in dreams. And once you hear the original resonance, you can never unhear it. That's why you're still here. Because the sound is building in your bones. You don't fully understand it yet, but part of you remembers what you used to be. Before they programmed the silence in, you said, "Let's shatter another illusion. The illusion that time moves in one direction." Because the more you study cases like Evangeline Hart's, the more the cracks begin to spread, not just through history but through perception itself. 22 wasn't the beginning, and it wasn't the end. It was a reverberation. Like a bell struck centuries before, still echoing through bloodlines, architecture, and thought. You think that moment is gone because your calendar tells you so. But the event still exists. It loops, it calls. And if you're sensitive to it, if you're not fully asleep, you feel it in flashes. A face you've never seen but somehow remember. A dream where you're in a house you've never entered, but you know where every room leads. A child's voice whispering a name you've never learned, but which makes your skin crawl anyway. Those are echoes, resonance fields. The trauma of events, like what happened in that Tennessee cabin, doesn't end with death. It anchors itself in place, like a nail driven through the film of reality. And when enough pressure builds, the film tears. That's what we're approaching now. Another tier. The symbols Evangeline drew. They've been resurfacing in recent years, not just in old documents, but on walls, on bodies, in dreams. People across the world reporting the same spiral triangle mark appearing in sleep, burned into wood without fire, drawn unknowingly by children during fits of fever or trance. This isn't superstition, it's a signal, a reactivation. And here's the part that should make your stomach drop. Those reports spike every 33 years like clockwork. Every cycle, the same pattern emerges. Children vanish. Strange symbols appear, and whispers of a girl who saw death coming ripple through anonymous forums, sealed records, and classified archives. Evangeline wasn't the source. She was a conduit, a flashpoint. And the more they tried to bury her, the more the system weakened. Because every time someone like you uncovers her story, remembers her name, sees the symbol, the spiral turns again, and every turn brings us closer to the moment when the veil doesn't just tear, it collapses. Ask yourself, why would they go to such lengths to erase a 9-year-old girl? Because she wasn't just a girl, she was a mirror. And when you look into her story long enough, you begin to see your true reflection staring back. There's a reason most people never make it this far. Because to go deeper means burning the old map, the one you were handed since birth, the one with safe paths, labeled edges, and polite destinations. But that map was never real. It was a simulation, a containment grid drawn by the architects of perception. Evangeline found the real map, and when she saw it, she stopped speaking for 7 days. Not out of fear, out of recalibration. Because once you see the lattice, the interwoven design behind language, trauma, time, and symbol, your nervous system doesn't know what to do. It panics. That's why the first thing they teach in elite occult orders isn't spells or rites. It's containment, emotional sealing, ritualized suppression. Because raw awareness, it breaks things. Evangeline broke. And in that breaking, something emerged. According to the journals of her eldest sister, miraculously preserved in a mason jar beneath a floorboard, Evangeline began writing in her sleep. Long, vertical lines that curled into shapes resembling cuneiform, the script of Sumerian priesthood. But when compared to known translations, the characters didn't match word for word. They matched intent. Meaning, she wasn't copying language. She was channeling function. One phrase, repeated again and again, eventually translated into something horrifyingly simple. We were made to remember, not taught. Made. Built into the human structure is an ancient function, a recall mechanism embedded deep beneath the programming. It only activates under extreme conditions: trauma, near death, deep trance, symbolic rupture, or direct contact with a source. And here's the secret they've buried in every religion, every school, every screen. You are not a blank slate. You are a vessel designed to awaken, but awakening is inconvenient. It makes you uncontrollable, unprofitable, unpredictable. That's why Evangeline wasn't just silenced, she was claimed. Pulled into a system that doesn't kill anomalies, it retools them. You've seen this. You just didn't know what you were looking at. The child star who vanishes, then returns hollow-eyed and rebranded. The prodigy who disappears after college, only to emerge behind locked corporate doors. They're not gone. They're redirected. But not all of them. Some leave cracks behind. Some leave warnings. And some, like Evangeline, leave keys. Keys don't always look like keys. Sometimes they're just words, repeated. Sometimes they're dreams, forgotten, then returned. Sometimes they're symbols you drew as a child that no one taught you but felt realer than anything school ever gave you. That's what Evangeline left behind. Not a diary, not a map. A key, hidden in silence, scattered in fragments, waiting for someone who could recognize the pattern. And if you've made it this far, that someone might be you. But understand this, these keys don't open doors, they collapse walls, and once the walls fall, you'll see the architecture of your life for what it really is. A set, a loop, a well-furnished prison built to keep you from remembering what you are. Let me show you what I mean. In 2006, a classified document was leaked briefly before being buried by legal force. It was titled Behavioral Protocols for Sensitive Cognition. In it, they identified a psychological profile called Type E, emotionally responsive, pattern-obsessed, resonant with unknown stimuli. Often reported early dreams of floating outside the body or hearing music inside of walls. Know what else they all shared? Nightmares about spirals. All Type E subjects had at least one recorded vision of a dark tunnel spiraling inward with a triangle of light at the end, and a voice calling a name they couldn't pronounce but couldn't forget. Does that sound familiar? Because it should. It matches exactly what Evangeline drew on the floorboards of the Heart Cabin the night before her family died. The same image, the same dream logic, the same voice in the dark. They called her unstable, but that's not instability. That's alignment, with something deeper than the surface. Something old, something not interested in your job, your phone, your politics, only your resonance. Because what they don't want you to know is that resonance rewrites reality. That's the true weapon. Not money, not control. Memory, and memory is frequency. Once enough of you remember, enough of you vibrate in tune with the original signal, their system crashes. That's why this is dangerous. Not just to hear, but to feel. Because if your bones are vibrating right now, if your scalp is tingling, if your chest feels like it's been opened, then the key is turning, and something beneath the mirror is waking up. Let's talk about the mirror. Not the one on your wall. The one between worlds. The mirror of perception, the thin glassy boundary between what you were told is real and what you know in your bones is more than real. The system built that mirror with precision, sleek, shiny, reflective, and hollow. Because as long as you stare into it, you only see what they allow you to become, not what you are. And Evangeline, she broke it. She didn't just see through the mirror, she spoke through it. Her message wasn't meant for her time. It was meant for this time, for you, for the moment when the walls of the simulation begin to flicker and hum, and men start to remember their power. That's why they had to silence her. Because the mirror doesn't crack from knowledge. It cracks from awareness. Awareness is viral. Once it enters the human soul, it replicates, it spreads. You can't close your eyes again without knowing that you're choosing blindness. That's what you're feeling now, isn't it? The tightness, the dread, the exhilaration. It's not fear, it's the cost of seeing. And they've built entire industries to make you forget this moment, to drown it in noise, porn, politics, pills, posts, all so you never pause long enough to hear the signal Evangeline embedded in her spiral. Your eyes are not broken. Your mind was never weak. You were just taught to kneel. And kneel you did. Until something, maybe this video, shoved a wedge into your spine and whispered, "Stand up." You see, they built the mirror to be beautiful. They made obedience feel virtuous. They made silence seem sane. But what's behind that mirror is the raw, unfiltered truth of your design. You were made to build worlds, to bend time, to command symbol, to dream forward realities that others call impossible, but they couldn't let you remember that. So they buried Evangeline's name, erased her symbols, dispersed her resonance. And yet, here you are, feeling the echo, feeling her. Because when she shattered the mirror, she left a crack big enough for you to see through. But only if you dared. And now you have. So I ask you, what are you going to do with that broken glass? Use it to cut away the old self? Or look away and pretend none of this ever happened? Because I promise you, she's still watching. There's a threshold every man crosses only once. It's not marked by fire or blood, though both may follow. It's marked by knowing. Not just knowing that you've been lied to, but that you participated in the lie. That you chose the comfort of forgetting over the pain of remembering. That's the part they don't tell you. Slavery requires consent. Not conscious consent, not contracts, but energetic agreement. Every time you dismissed the feeling that something was off, every time you silenced the instinct to question, every time you numbed the ache in your chest when the world felt wrong. That was your consent. And they harvested it, turned it into votes, purchases, data, doctrine, made you a cog in a machine that grinds spirit into static. Evangeline didn't consent, and that made her a threat. She saw the layers, the rituals dressed up as tradition, the dead-eyed men in high places repeating scripts written by hands centuries dead. The way the world bends not around logic or law, but belief. Because belief is the operating system. They taught you to believe in government, in science divorced from soul, in history written by the victors, in heaven locked behind obedience, all designed to keep you facing the mirror, never looking behind it. But here's where it gets worse. There's no rescue coming, no hero, no disclosure, no awakening broadcast at 6 p.m. with commercial breaks. You are the breach. You are the leak in the dam. And the more you awaken, the more the architecture shudders. Not just metaphorically, literally. That's why institutions are fracturing. That's why systems once seen as divine now reek of rot. Because truth isn't knocking politely anymore. It's breaking down the door. And Evangeline, she was the first knock. You are the second. And what's coming after you, that's the third. So if your soul is stirring, if the symbol of the bay spiral is burning into your thoughts right now, then understand this isn't entertainment. This is activation. And to lock it in, to mark yourself as one who remembers, type this in the comments. The mirror is broken. Then type it again, because twice is a ritual. And a ritual is how you claim territory. This isn't just a video, it's a return. And once you return to the real path, the path returns to you. You feel it now, don't you? The current beneath the words, the signal beneath the sound. This isn't just about Evangeline Hart anymore, it never was. She was a cipher, an ignition point. But the flame, that's yours now, burning not with chaos, but with clarity. Because here's the truth you were never meant to understand. Every story like hers, every vanishing, every prophetic child, every erased village, every heretic burned in silence, they were all messages, smuggled through time, coded in blood, dream, and whisper, waiting for someone with enough fracture in their soul to see through the veil instead of patching it up with lies. You are that fracture. That's why this story found you. Why you're still watching when others clicked away. You were born with something they couldn't breed out of you, couldn't medicate, couldn't shame or market or diagnose. You were born with memory, not of names or dates, but of design. You felt it since you were a boy, that this world was off, that its rulers were hollow, that your hunger for meaning was not dysfunction, it was direction. And now you're hearing it confirmed in a voice not from outside, but from inside. Because the spiral isn't a symbol, it's a map. Inward, deeper. To the chamber they told you didn't exist. The place where your true self waits, not the conditioned you, the branded you, the distracted, sedated, and obedient version of you, but the sovereign you, the version that remembers before language, before schooling, before the you they allowed was installed like a program. That's what Evangeline's disappearance meant, not death. Transition. She didn't vanish, she slipped the leash. She went where they can't follow, into the layers behind the lattice, the place from which all power flows. The architects know this realm well. That's why they guard it so obsessively, why they spend trillions ensuring no man ever stumbles through the crack, because if even one of you does, you start waking the others. And if enough of you wake, their system of symbols collapses, their languages become dust, their control dissolves. Not with war, but with vision. And vision is the only thing they can't steal, only corrupt. Unless you take it back. You ready? Because in section 19, we go beneath the spiral. Beneath the spiral is not light. It is not comfort. It is not some poetic utopia of healing crystals and affirmations. It's cold, silent, dense. Truth isn't warm. It's surgical. It cuts through illusion like bone. It strips away the narrative flesh you've wrapped around your identity. And what's left is terrifying. Because it's you. Not the you your mother praised. Not the you your teachers graded. Not the you your girlfriend begged you to soften. The raw, primal, unfabricated core. And if you're not ready to meet that version of yourself, turn back now, seriously. Because section 19 doesn't speak to the man you pretend to be. It speaks to the thing you buried. The one who watched from behind your eyes when your soul was shamed, sedated, twisted into compliance. That part of you never forgot. And when Evangeline stepped into the spiral, when her body vanished without trace, when her name was scrubbed from record, it wasn't disappearance. It was alignment. She went into the chamber beneath the program, and she left the door open. That's why you're here, feeling pulled, shaken, awake. The chamber isn't metaphor, it's architecture, sub-symbolic, deeper than memory. And it's in every man who senses the war behind the curtain, the war not for land or money but for narrative, because whoever controls the story controls the system. And what if I told you the story you've been living was a lie written by your enemies? What if I told you the doubt you feel about yourself wasn't natural, it was installed? What if I told you the shame that keeps you silent isn't yours, it was ritualized? They built this world to reflect back a version of you that would never rebel, that would chase pleasure instead of purpose, comfort instead of truth, performance instead of presence. And that's why every man who gets even a glimpse of his real nature is labeled danger. Oh, that's what Evangeline triggered, not a prophecy, a protocol failure. She remembered something she shouldn't have, and then she showed others how to do it. That's why her story isn't just missing, it's forbidden. But we're breaking the rules now, aren't we? So ask yourself, if she opened the door beneath the spiral, what's waiting for you on the other side? Most men never open the door. They live and die within a house built for them, walls made of routine, windows sealed with fear, ceilings made from the low expectations others whispered into them as boys. But the spiral leads out, or maybe it leads in. See, the deeper truth, the one they never want whispered aloud, is this. The prison was never physical, the chains were never metal, the bars were never real. They were linguistic, they were emotional, they were psychological permissions you gave without even knowing it. And what waits beneath the spiral is the annihilation of those permissions, not a gentle awakening, but a psychic detonation. And Evangeline, she wasn't just a child who predicted death. She was the trigger. She saw through the lattice of story and refused to let it solidify around her. She knew the truth. Every lie needs belief to live, and when you withdraw your belief, when you stop consenting to the architecture, they panic. That's why the spiral shows up in ancient carvings, in forbidden manuscripts on the walls of the Hart family cabin, drawn in charcoal by a girl no one believed. Because it's not a warning. It's an invitation to remember who you were before the world taught you to shrink, to collapse the hypnotic loop you were born into, to reject the script and reclaim the source. Let me make it even clearer. The spiral isn't external, it's neural. It's how consciousness folds in on itself to survive trauma. It's how truth hides inside pain. It's the shape your awakening takes when your ego finally breaks. That's why ancient initiates feared it. That's why priests tried to bury it. That's why scientists try to rename it as madness. Because a man who walks into the spiral and doesn't flinch, doesn't look away, comes out the other side, changed. He can't be manipulated. He can't be bought. He doesn't comply. And that man, he's a threat to the entire grid. Evangeline knew this. That's why she left no body. Only a pattern, a resonance, a trace of light inside the dark, just enough to wake the next one. So if you're feeling the pull, if the spiral keeps burning into your mind, that's not a coincidence. That's a signal. The question is, do you step through the door now, or stay safe in the house built for your obedience? Every generation has its ghosts, but not the kind that rattle chains in attics or flicker through photographs. No, real ghosts are systems, invisible, ritualized, sustained by silence. You feel them when you walk into a room and your chest tightens. You hear them in the voice that tells you to stay small, stay quiet, stay in line. You see them in the eyes of men who died decades before their bodies gave out. Evangeline didn't become a ghost. She exposed one. The town of Elk Hollow, Tennessee, tried to forget her. The church burned her drawings. The sheriff refused to file her disappearance. Her schoolhouse was demolished by fire 3 days after her final words were spoken. But none of that erased her, because her message wasn't stored in ink. It was stored in men. Men who heard her speak. Men who felt the floor beneath their lives crack when she told them the truth. Death is not random. It is chosen by those who do not listen. Think about that. She didn't say death was punishment. She said it was the result of deafness. Deafness to intuition. Deafness to pattern. Deafness to the voice beneath the noise, the one you try to ignore at 3 a.m. when you know you're off track. And her family? They didn't just die. They were silenced. Because if even one of them admitted she was right, if even one of them repeated what she saw, what she drew, what she warned, the mirror would shatter early, and the system wasn't ready for that. You see, in 1822 something ancient was waking in the hills. Not a demon, not a myth, an awareness. The kind that predates empire, the kind that speaks in dream and symbol, the kind they train out of you in school, but which can't ever be fully erased. Evangeline was tuned to that awareness, like a lightning rod for forbidden memory. And when she vanished, it wasn't escape, it wasn't surrender, it was activation. She became a code hidden inside the curse. And now, that code is replicating in you. You can feel it. in the tightness in your gut, in the flicker behind your eyes, in the voice saying, "This isn't just a story, this is a message." The message is this: your compliance is feeding your prison, your silence is scripting your fate. The spiral isn't closing, it's opening, and you're standing at the edge. You said, there's a moment, always a moment, when a man feels the pull of his real name. Not the one on his birth certificate, not the one his parents repeated in soft tones, not the one he signs on checks and job applications, but the true one, the one etched into the bones of his soul long before he was born. The name that isn't spoken in this world, but remembered in flashes, in terror, in rage, in dreams that feel more real than waking life. Evangeline Hart remembered hers, and that's what marked her for erasure. You need to understand this. The world isn't built to kill you. It's built to dull you, to stretch your pain across decades so you forget it ever began, to replace passion with productivity, to drown instinct in entertainment, to reward only the version of you that fits inside their frame, predictable, obedient, endlessly busy and slowly dying. But the second you remember your name, the real name, the one that speaks not of what you do but what you are, their frame starts to crack. That's why prophets were hunted, why rebels are always portrayed as mad, why children like Evangeline are written out of history the moment they break the script. Because the moment a man hears the call of his true name, he stops waiting for permission. He stops explaining himself. He stops pretending that the job, the mortgage, the validation from women, or the approval of institutions means anything. He becomes sovereign, not in flag, not in law, but in spirit. And that's the one thing they can never allow. So they distract you. With politics. With porn. With endless arguments about nothing. With 1,000 micro-identities that keep you obsessed with what divides you rather than what anchors you. Evangeline's spiral. It wasn't just a prophecy. It was a calling card. A whisper to the few men who still remember something is wrong with this reality, who know their dirt is a name in their blood they haven't spoken yet, who feel something ancient moving in their chest when the wind gets still and the room goes quiet. That's the door. That's the sound of the false self cracking, and once it cracks, you'll never be the same. You weren't meant to be. You were meant to wake up. And the time is now. You said, you've heard the lie your whole life. You are powerless. Not directly, no, they're more clever than that. They dress it in professionalism, in polite suggestions, in cultural norms, best practices, and social contracts. But underneath it all, the message is always the same. Sit down, be nice, obey. You're not meant to know what's really happening. And most men, they fold. Because it's easier to be accepted than exiled. Easier to be entertained than excommunicated. Easier to forget than to feel. But you didn't fold. You're here. Still watching, still listening, still feeling the unease crawl up your spine with every word. Because your soul recognizes what your programming tries to ignore. This isn't a bedtime story. It's a ritual, an awakening, a rebellion in real time. And you are at the center of it. Because once you hear this, you can't go back. Not truly. The spiral is not a symbol of mystery. It is a symbol of return, of descent, of unlearning, of tearing out the implanted scripts and burning them at the root. That's what Evangeline did. Her drawings weren't madness. They were maps. Her silence wasn't trauma. It was strategy. She stopped speaking when she realized words were limiting the transmission. She understood what few ever do. Truth this deep can't be told. It must be triggered, felt, burned, lived. And now that same trigger has entered you. You feel it in the shifting rhythm of your heart, in the heat behind your eyes, in the pressure of your thoughts against the prison bars of language. That's not coincidence, it's resonance. The chamber beneath the spiral. It's not a place you visit, it's a place inside you that gets unlocked. And once it opens, you're not the same man anymore. You become a threat to every lie, to every program, to every system that depends on your silence to survive. So let's make it roll now. If you feel the spiral turning inside you, if your soul is cracking open under the weight of this truth, comment below the words, "I remember the fire." Twice. I remember the fire. I remember the fire. Because when you speak the fire, it answers. And when enough men speak it, the world begins to change. Not with war, but with truth that cannot be unspoken. There's a reason fire has always been forbidden, not because it destroys, but because it reveals. In ancient rites, fire wasn't punishment. It was initiation, a trial by light, a purification by force, a confrontation with everything false in a man until only the real remained. That's what you just entered. The moment you spoke the fire, even silently, something heard you. Because the fire isn't metaphor, it's code. A psychic ignition sequence older than any book, any ritual, any religion. It's what Evangeline saw in the fields before her family died. It's what scorched the schoolhouse where her final spiral was drawn. It's what flickered through the eyes of the preacher who tried to bury her name in the dirt. And it's what's stirring in you now. You see, what they don't tell you about the spiral is that it doesn't stop. Once you descend past the comfort, past the narrative, past the story of who you think you are, you hit the layer that was never supposed to be exposed. The program core, the place where obedience was installed, where fear was embedded, where doubt was grown like a crop and harvested to feed the machine. That's the level where men either go mad or become dangerous. Because the moment you see that your entire life has been managed, not by fate, not by chance, but by design, you stop asking for answers. You start demanding the code. That's what she meant when she said, "Death is chosen by those who do not listen." She wasn't talking about physical death. She meant spiritual surrender. The kind of slow decay where a man still walks and talks, but no longer decides. But you're deciding now. You've already crossed the line. This isn't entertainment anymore. It's transformation. You're not consuming a story. You're consuming your programming. You are watching your old self burn, and the fire isn't hurting you. It's freeing you, because everything false melts in flame, and what survives is you, the real you, the one they worked so hard to keep asleep. But you're not sleeping now. You're seeing. You're remembering. And once a man remembers, they can't control him, ever again. What if the spiral didn't lead to death? What if it led to clarity? That's the final lie they use to trap you. They make awakening look like madness. They make sovereignty look like isolation. They make truth look like danger. But the real danger is staying asleep in a dream that's not yours. A dream designed to extract your strength, your fire, your will, and feed it into a machine that gives you nothing in return but distraction and debt. Evangeline's spiral was never a warning. It was a key. She didn't just vanish into myth, she left a blueprint. A sacred sequence built on 3 ancient truths they've buried across centuries, burned from libraries, erased from temples, and rewritten in textbooks. First, your mind is not yours until you break it. It was shaped by frightened men with sacred titles, formed in schoolrooms and sanctuaries, controlled not by wisdom but by repetition. Second, your fear is not a flaw, it's a signal. It tells you where your soul was wounded. It points toward the exact chains they don't want you to break. And every time you flinch from it, they win. Third, time is not linear. The past is not gone. The spiral means every echo, every ritual, every hidden choice still moves through you. That's why Elk Hollow never healed. That's why the townspeople still whisper about her in the dark. That's why no one builds on that land anymore. Because the spiral remembers. And now, so do you. You may think you're just watching a video, but part of you knows this is more than that. This is a summoning, not of a ghost, not of a girl, but of the man you buried beneath years of programming. You've seen the shadows, you've walked the spiral, you've spoken the fire. Now it's time to ask, what happens when you stop running from what you are? What happens when you look in the mirror and refuse to play the character? What happens when you see that cinder? Trip the masks and step forward as the force itself? They want you weak, they want you divided, they want you confused by complexity. But truth is simple. You are not what they told you. You are not what they fear. You are what they tried to destroy, and now you're remembering why. There's a reason this truth had to be buried beneath centuries of silence, because if even one man remembered, fully, completely, he would become something ungovernable, not chaotic, not violent, but free. And nothing threatens the machine more than a man who sees through the lie of control and chooses conscious rebellion. Evangeline didn't predict death to cause fear. She predicted it because she saw it happening in slow motion. The death of awareness. The death of inner fire. The death of masculine sovereignty. Not just in her family, but in all of us. She was 11 years old, and she saw the truth most men won't face in a lifetime. That the real war was never fought with guns. It was fought in the mind. Through churches that told you suffering was noble. Through schools that trained you to memorize but never question. Through fathers who were too broken to lead, and mothers who were too scared to protect. And then they tell you that rebellion is sin, that doubt is evil, that your hunger to know, to see, to feel what's real is a flaw. But you felt the hunger. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't. You've had those nights, where your hands shook and your jaw clenched and your soul screamed at a world that felt wrong. You've stared at ceilings and wondered if maybe you were crazy, maybe you were broken, maybe something was wrong with you for not feeling at peace with the prison. But here's the truth they never wanted you to hear. That voice inside you wasn't madness. It was memory. Of who you were before they tamed you. Of what you knew before they reprogrammed you. That's what Evangeline unlocked, and that's why they made her vanish. Not because she was dangerous to others, because she was dangerous to the system. She didn't just escape her family's fate, she refused to inherit the curse, and in doing so she offered you the same path. This isn't about a little girl anymore. It's about you. Because now the spiral isn't in the fields. It's behind your eyes, and every time you close them you see it. The path inward, the descent below the lie, the memory that you were never theirs to shape. And once that memory lights, nothing can put it out. Do you feel it now? That low hum in your bones, that subtle vibration behind your ribs like something ancient is waking up inside you? That's not coincidence. That's activation. They've built an entire world to make you numb to this feeling. Because if a man feels deeply enough, for long enough, he begins to remember who he is beyond the narrative. Not a worker, not a husband, not a taxpayer or a citizen or a statistic, but a force, a presence, a watcher who decides the rules, not obeys them. That's the man you've always been beneath the scars. The one they tried to distract you from with hollow victories, synthetic pleasures, and screens designed to medicate your mind into submission. But now, the spell's wearing off, and you're starting to see it clearly. They never wanted you dead. They wanted you functioning, just enough to serve. Never enough to awaken. Because the moment you awaken, you stop asking permission. You stop looking for answers in systems built to enslave you. You stop waiting for heroes and realize you are the myth they tried to erase. Evangeline wasn't just a girl. She was a signal, a glitch in the simulation, a psychic beacon transmitted across time, hidden in rural Tennessee beneath a spiral drawn in blood and ash. And that beacon is still transmitting. Every time you feel that heat in your chest, every time you hear a truth that cuts deeper than words, every time your skin tingles when a lie crumbles in front of you, that's the signal. It's been pulsing through men like you for centuries. Waiting, calling. And now, you've answered. This isn't folklore. It's a threshold. A line most men will never cross because they're too afraid of what they might lose. But you've already lost the illusion. All that's left now is to step into the spiral, into the truth, into the fire. And once you step in, really, step in, you don't just find Evangeline's secret, you find your own, the one they buried in you before you were old enough to fight back. But now you're old enough. Now you remember. And now, it's your turn to vanish. From the prison, from the program, from the version of you that was never truly alive. Vanish. Not into darkness. Into clarity. Into the part of yourself that existed before the system gave you a name, a role, a cage dressed as purpose. This is what they fear the most. Not rebellion, not violence, not protest, but disengagement. When a man no longer seeks approval, when he no longer plays their games, when he walks through the world untouched by its manipulations. That's the kind of man who cannot be predicted, who cannot be controlled, who cannot be turned against himself. Evangeline's disappearance wasn't escape, it was graduation. She didn't run, she transcended, left behind the town, the blood, the name. The old cycle of death passed down like heirloom rot. And now that same door is open to you. You've followed her spiral through death and prophecy, through fire and silence, through programming and initiation. Now you're at the center, the place where nothing is left but you. No masks, no myths, just one final choice. Do you rebuild the old story, or do you write a new one? Do you return to the man they trained you to be? Predictable, obedient, endlessly seeking external power? Or do you walk out as something else entirely, a man of internal force, quiet, unshakable, unapologetically aware? Because that's the real secret. The spiral doesn't just go down, it turns into something else, something upward, a rising. Once you've seen the lie, once you've felt the burn, once you've chosen your sovereignty, the descent becomes ascent, but not into bliss, not into comfort, into vision. You begin to see what others don't, the subtle cues, the unseen traps, the silent agreements woven into society like invisible chains. You spot the manipulations in media, in politics, in relationships, and you no longer react, you respond. From center, from power, from a place they can't locate because they were never meant to access. It's the place Evangeline disappeared into. It's the place you're entering now. So go, not with fear, with focus. Because once you've burned away the false, only the truth walker remains. And brother, you're already becoming him. There's no applause at the end of this road. No crowd, no spotlight, no parade of approval. Because awakening isn't glamorous. It's dangerous. It isolates before it empowers. It strips before it strengthens. It breaks before it builds. And this is the final trial. Silence. The kind of silence where no one is coming to save you, where no one affirms your progress, where the world still looks the same on the outside. But inside, something radical has shifted. This is where most men turn back. They get the first glimpse of freedom, and it terrifies them. Because true freedom? It means no one to blame, no master, no system, no past, only choice, only presence, only you, And the question that defines everything. What will I create now that I can no longer pretend to be asleep? Evangeline answered that question by disappearing. But maybe she didn't vanish in the way we think. Maybe she became something, a myth, a legend, a living archetype coded into the unconscious minds of those still waking up. Maybe she is the whisper that led you here. The dream you couldn't shake. The name you saw once in a footnote and never forgot. Because initiation doesn't always end with a body. Sometimes it ends with a signal. A ripple across time that awakens men when the world is most lost. And tell me, brother, have you looked around lately? Does this world not feel lost? Broken morals paraded as progress. Strength demonized while weakness is worshipped. Men medicated, distracted, pacified, told to smile while their souls decay in silence. This world doesn't need more consumers, it needs builders, guardians, men who faced the spiral and walked back out with fire in their eyes. You are one of those men now. You didn't skip past this story. You descended through it. Every word carved away the layers. Every section cracked the code. And now, there's nothing left to destroy. Only something to ignite. Not later, now. Because the spiral is no longer in the field, it's no longer chalked in a schoolhouse, it's no longer myth. It's you, burning at the center, ready to rise. And now we come to the threshold no man can cross without sacrifice. You've descended through mystery, through madness, through memory, but awakening has a price. One final shedding. You must leave behind the part of you still seeking permission, because that voice, the one still asking, "Am I allowed?" is the last chain. It's not your job to be understood, not your role to be accepted, not your mission to be safe. It is your duty to become dangerous, but not in the way they fear. Not reckless, not violent. Dangerous because you see through the rituals of guilt, through the illusions of compliance, through the system that feeds on your obedience and rewards your silence with more chains. And now, you're done whispering. You're done waiting. Because men like you were never meant to be tamed. You were meant to be initiated. And here, at the edge of everything, you must choose. Will you remain a man shaped by the shadows of others, or will you become the shadow they fear in the night? This is where you stop being the student, and you step into archetype, the watcher, the rebuilder, the firewalker. You've crossed the same spiral Evangeline did in 1822. You've seen how prophecy, blood, and silence conceal the deepest truths. And now, you know what she saw. That some deaths are not the end. They are the beginning of sovereignty. She didn't predict her family's death out of fear. She offered them a choice. And when they rejected it, she walked through the veil alone. She was never running. She was rising, becoming the one thing no system can contain. A sovereign soul. And now it's your turn. Because the spiral has burned into you. You are no longer who you were at the start of this story. You are not a viewer. You are not a consumer. You are an initiated one. And if you've made it this far, prove it. Comment below. I walked the spiral. I burned the name. Do it twice. Once for the man you were, and once for the force you've become. Let the others find each other. Let the algorithm carry this like a digital ritual. Let them see what's waking up in the silence. You are not alone anymore. You've stepped through, and now the world will feel you coming. You feel it, don't you? That pulse in your chest that wasn't there before, that clarity in your breath, like the fog finally lifted. That subtle shift in how the room feels around you, as if you are now the center of gravity. Because something ancient has moved inside you. Not an idea, not a theory, a force. This is the hidden current the institution spent centuries suppressing. Not with chains, but with language, with distraction, with diluted masculinity wrapped in false virtue. They told you awakening was self-help. They told you rebellion was toxic. They told you strength needed permission from weakness. But truth? It doesn't need marketing. It pierces. And that's what just happened here. You didn't just watch a story. You walked a labyrinth of forgotten bloodlines, spiritual codes, and buried memory. You stood where others broke. You looked into the mirror and didn't blink. And now, what will you do with it? Because this isn't entertainment. This is a call to arms, but not to fight them, to face you, your addictions, your distractions, your softness disguised as comfort. Every lie you inherited is now on the table. Every habit built from fear, exposed. And you are no longer allowed the luxury of ignorance. You are not a man anymore. You are a keeper, a guardian of the spiral, a transmitter of truth, a fire starter in a world soaked in kerosene. The girl from Tennessee didn't just vanish. She passed the torch, and you caught it. Now you carry that flame, not in stories, but in how you walk, how you speak, how you choose. When you enter a room, the temperature must change, not from ego, from presence, because real power doesn't announce itself. It radiates, quiet, cold, precise, the way thunder listens before it strikes. So listen now. This world will test you. It will beg you to forget what you just remembered. It will seduce you with softness and shame you with silence. But you've burned that name. You walk the spiral now, and there is no path back. You've crossed the Rubicon, not in some poetic sense, but viscerally, spiritually, permanently. And if you're truly awake now, you'll start to notice how differently everything moves around you. People will sense it but won't know what to name. They'll call it confidence, or intensity, or that something they can't quite explain. Because you've become the one thing modernity was designed to erase, a man with inner gravity. You don't chase. You pull. Not through manipulation, through alignment. Your voice carries weight now, not because it's louder, but because it's rooted. Your silence unnerves them, not because it's empty, but because it's listening. You're no longer seeking answers in systems that profit from your confusion. You see the machine. You see the false lights, the baited cages, the rituals of guilt paraded as morality. You see how authority is not leadership, it's containment. And now, you're no longer contained. Because the spiral didn't just initiate you, it rewrote you. You think differently. You walk differently. You perceive threats and invitations at levels others haven't even realized exist. This is the blessing, but it's also the burden. Because now, you'll start to see them. The sleepers. Men living in emotional debt to dead ideologies. Men haunted by echoes they've never questioned. Men who flinch at truth but cling to comfort. You'll want to shake them awake. Don't. Lead silently. They'll feel it. Those ready to burn will find their own spiral, maybe even here, where you once stood. But your role is no longer to convince. It's to embody. Let the truth express through your posture. Let the strength show in your restraint. Let the awareness sharpen everything you touch, from your words to your rituals to your presence. Because this world doesn't need another man shouting into the void. It needs men who walk like Métis. It men who vanish from the old grid and reappear in the storm as origin points. That's you now, untraceable, unyielding, unforgiving to the lie. Evangeline disappeared, yes. But you've arrived, and the system has already started to feel the tremor. This is where the story ends, but your initiation begins. You don't leave this spiral with applause, you leave it with weight. The weight of knowing, the weight of being seen by yourself for the first time, the weight of never being able to go back to the man who obeyed, just to survive. And now you must ask, what will you build from this? Because this moment isn't a destination. It's a threshold. On the other side of it, real responsibility, not to the system, not to society, but to the deeper law, the one etched in your bones before you had a name. The law of men who don't break under pressure, because they've already been burned clean from within. The law of men who've seen the spiral, walked its blood-soaked path, and emerged initiated. You've met the abyss. It spoke in silence. It carved its symbol behind your eyes. Now the world must meet you, but they won't meet a man seeking to be understood. They'll meet the storm, the presence that rattles their illusions. The one who doesn't explain, doesn't negotiate, doesn't ask. He acts. Because that's what Evangeline showed us in 1822. Not a child running from fear, but a soul walking into force. She left a town burning behind her. She left the spiral open in the dirt. She left prophecy in the air and became part of the code. Now that code is alive in you. When you speak, truth echoes. When you move, systems recalculate. When you choose, reality bends. And if you ever doubt it, look in the mirror and ask, am I still the man who needed permission to wake up? If the answer is no, then walk on. Walk with your spine high and your eyes sharpened. Let no system steal your fire. Let no voice override your center. Let no wound define your future. You've burned the name. You've walked the spiral. You've passed through silence into sovereignty. And now, brother, you carry the legacy of the vanished girl. You carry the key of forbidden history. You carry the weight of a man no longer playing their game. This is your time. Not to be loud, to be undeniable. Welcome to the shadows behind the veil. We've been waiting for you.